Well, welcome back to Growing Money with Sean Trace. I've got a really awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. My name is Derek Mazzarella. I'm a certified financial planner, and I really just help people make better decisions with their money. So generally, I get them from one. I mean, that's really it, right? Simplify.
Right? That's awesome.
Where do you want to be? Okay, let's figure out a way to get there. That's what I do.
That's awesome. And could you ask me the question that you asked me before we started? And I want to kind of fill in.
Yeah, sure. I'm always curious because you reached out, so I was just curious why you wanted to reach out to record the podcast.
For sure. So there's a couple reasons. First of all, I did not grow up with financial information. I always throw my parents under the bus on here. Not going to throw my parents under the bus today. I love them to pieces. But, I just think it was not just their job. I didn't get much financial education in school, anywhere. And it wasn't until I did my MBA that I was like, I got some type of an understanding of numbers and money. And I was like, this is interesting. And I went through all this and I was like, I still know nothing. So I kicked off this podcast with the idea of talking to people who did know about money, because now I'm tasked with imparting financial information to an 8-year-old and talking to her about concepts as she's asking me, and I didn't have all this information. And it was really cool because I'm trying to distill down some of the things I learned in business school and what I'm learning from my podcast guests to give her insights. And so we were doing a game like Red Ocean, Blue Ocean, where we were looking at, entrepreneurial ideas. And so we were driving down this street, and a friend of ours just opened a bakery. And she was like, Dad, there's a lot of restaurants on this street. It's a red ocean. This is a very competitive place. I was like, that's my kid. That's
Wow.
right. And I said, what could we do to make it a better business? Well, she's like, well, you could change it like this, or you could have, delivery or things like that make it. And so I was just like, yes. So that's my goal. That has been my goal with this podcast. And one of the reasons I reached out to you was because the content that you were sharing seemed accessible. And that's one of the things that was really interesting to me, because a lot of the financial podcast, and I had the funniest insult / compliment the other day with my podcast. Someone was watching my podcast, and it was someone I had invited on. She's like, you're doing something that no one does. And I was like, what is that? She's like, it's kind of like The Idiot's Guide to Money. And I was like, I love you for saying that, because I love those books. Like, they're so great. They're so accessible, because when I watch, I love Prof G and his podcast, but I don't understand half the stuff that's being said. I listen because I'm like, I want to learn. I want to know this. But when they're talking about the performance of this stock versus that stock, and I'm like, stocks are interesting. Like, what do we do with them? And so I'm taking some, I'm educating myself, and I'm doing everything I can to get more information as I develop this podcast. But it is for idiots like me, and that want to have a goal, like you were saying. I would like to have some money set aside so that I don't have to worry about my daughter's education, so I can pay off my student loans, so that I can start hoping to retire in a semi-nice way. These are things that I'm looking at, and that's why I reached out to you, and why I love what you said about helping people make better money decisions.
I mean, that's really all it comes down to. At the end of the day, it's, if we keep improving a little bit here, a little bit there, because I found in working with folks is that they have this whack-a-mole approach to finances. Like, oh, I'm an adult now, I think I need to get a house, right? So I talk to a mortgage broker, and then you do that. Cool, boom, check that off the list, knock that mole down, right? And then, okay, well, I've got this retirement account at work. Okay, boom, check that off, right? And then, I have a kid now. I need maybe a will. Is that what I need? A will? Boom. Okay, I got that done, right? And they just don't look at how everything impacts their total financial picture, because they make decisions in silos. So that's one of the things we kind of help look at is, okay, if we make a decision here, how's that impacting what you're doing over here?
I love that. And one of the things I like with that, I come from, I actually studied Chinese medicine. I did acupuncture, and in distance. One of the things that is interesting about that is that the holistic medicine, they approach things from a holistic approach, that if you have a pain in your shoulder, it might not just be that something right here that's happening. Maybe you've got something down here that is out of balance, or that you're compensating and doing something different. So that if you try to isolate things into one area, you're never really looking at the whole problem. And like, you see this with money where someone's like, I'm going to focus on this. This is the thing that I need to do. Really, they need to focus on this, whatever those things might be, because to get this resolved, you got to work, and it's like this, this whole perspective, mind, body, money, I don't know. There was a holistic approach to money,
Absolutely. Yeah, because what most people don't think, like, let's take the house, for example. They'll say, okay, well, my mortgage broker says I can afford a house at $750,000. All right, you can, that's great, but then does that mean you have less money to save for retirement? And then, okay, now we're talking about the tax implications over there. So you really want to look at, the totality of your decisions and think, okay, I can do this, but where is it going to impact me down the line?
It's so important. And it's like, I like that, because also, one of the first things I wanted to ask you is, someone comes to you. What's the first step to help get them financially organized? Like, where do you start?
To me, that's the most important step, Sean, honestly, because if you don't know where you are, you don't know how you can, where you're going, right? Because you don't know, okay, do I need to improve this area? You're just lost, right? So the first thing I do is, I use a financial planning tool called Right Capital. And basically what we do is we kind of dump everything into this financial planning software. The nice thing is it can link accounts, so it can give us updated daily balances on where things are, but it'll track things like your debts, whether that's your credit card or your mortgage or your auto loan, your insurances. So basically the first step is let's kind of do a dump and let's put everything that's kind of in this junk drawer that most people have, and let's put it in one place so we can kind of create a snapshot of where you are. So generally I'll click that. I'll also typically collect things like tax returns and statements to look at how they're invested. Things are okay, from a tax return standpoint, are there things that you're not filing correctly? I'm not a CPA by any means, but I do know how to read tax returns better than most folks. So I can give you a sense of, okay, and a lot of times they have little clues. Like I had a client, she has a Capital One savings account, which is typically a high yield savings account, but her interest earned was maybe like 0.5% on her tax return. Well, it turns out Capital One actually has 2 high yield savings accounts. And because I read her tax return, we were able to figure out she should be in a different high yield savings account for her emergency fund. And that was a $3,000 or $4,000 a year mistake. And that's what we can read from a tax return. Right. So that's why it makes sense to really look at everything you have, because they can give you clues as to where you are financially. That's really interesting.
Now, and because it's like, there is so much, like, with money, so many people, with anything, if you're not shining a light on something, like you get someone who's got a problem with my car. Well, what is it? I don't know. There's just a problem. I have no idea. It's making a funny noise. Well, have you looked to see? Well, I don't know where to look. And it's like the similar type of thing. Like, there might be a problem and people might think or know there's a problem, or they might not know there's a problem. They don't know that the check engine light coming on is a bad thing,
That's even worse, right? If they don't even notice or the check engine light bulb is out, right? But there's still a real problem underneath the surface that's building up. Like, that's an issue.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's all about knowing your numbers, because whatever gets measured gets managed, right? And like, imagine someone went on Shark Tank and didn't know any of the numbers, right? They would never invest, because you have to know, all right, how much money's coming in, how much is going out, what am I making on a widget? Same thing happens with your personal finances. If you don't know what's coming in and coming out on a consistent basis, that can be a real challenge in terms of building actual wealth in the future.
Yeah, because that's such a good point. Like, if you don't know where stuff is going, there's no way to funnel it toward the things that you want it to go towards. If you have this steady stream dumping over here, you're not even aware that you're losing stuff. I try to think about, I was trying to describe this to my daughter recently, and I was talking to her about this. Like, imagine that you have this big, one of those like above ground swimming pools, right? And you're trying to fill this thing up, putting buckets in there. And as many buckets as you're trying to pour in there, if there's a leak on the other side and the water's flowing out, as much as you try to dump it in there, you're not be filling that thing up. And she was like, wow. And I said, that's where you got to be careful where different things are going, or you're spending money in the wrong ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very important to track all that stuff. I mean, I don't really go to minutia with clients, or I'm looking at them like, all right, why are you spending this money at Chick-fil-A this month? It's, it's not typically about that. It's, I mean, usually the big three are, like where you live, what you drive, are really going to kind of drive, what you're doing anyway. Because people always talk about the coffee example, which matters, but in my opinion, it's more about the bigger expenses in your life that are going to matter more than that anyway. But a lot of times I see a lot of leakage, especially with folks that make more money. The more money they make, they just kind of spend and say, hey, I'm just going to keep making more money anyway, so it's not going to matter. So that's a challenge that I typically see is really kind of figuring out what's the right way to save money and do it on a consistent basis.
There was a good, I can't remember who posted it, but it was one of the financial experts that I follow on Instagram. And she pointed out, she's like, even some of my clients that make really large salaries, she's like 6 figures, they're still living paycheck to paycheck because they make more, but they don't have good money habits.
Right. It's all Parkinson's law. Have you heard of that?
No, what is that?
It's basically whatever, like think about like a house, right? Let's say you live in a condo your whole life. Then you buy a house that's 3 times the size. You're going to fill the space. So Parkinson's law talks about filling the space, right? So most people do that with their budget too. So, they're used to making 100,000, then they make 150. Okay, now their expenses just go by 50,000. Okay, now they're making 200,000. They go by another 50,000 because they get another new car or they go on more trips. So it just kind of fills whatever space they have. So we see that all the time with finances, where the more people make, they just spend because I can do it, right? I'm making more money. Like, why not I deserve this because I haven't had this before. Now I can get this. It's been a dream of mine. And that's what happens pretty consistently, especially a lot of high income earners.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, can you walk me through the process of creating a customized investment plan for someone? How do you do that?
I really have the Bill Belichick philosophy, where it's do your job. So it's basically like, what is a specific job of this account? Because some are there to be there for retirement. So those typically you want to make a little bit more aggressive if you have a longer time frame. And some may be, hey, I am saving up for this house, or I'm saving up for an addition on the house or a renovation. So I'm gonna spend this money in 2 to 3 years. So you're gonna invest that a little differently. So to me, the first step is kind of what's the big picture, what's the overarching purpose of this account, and then we want to align that to that. The next step is, okay, what's the tax treatment of this account? Is this going to be an IRA? Is this going to be an investment account? Because one thing that it's a small thing, but people don't pay attention to is the location of the asset. Like a bond will pay you interest every year. That's taxable as tax income. But capital gains is typically a 15% tax rate. So you want to have the right types of investments in that account. So you want to think, okay, what am I actually investing in? Now, which account is that best suited to go into? It's like the analogy I use all the time is like you want to put milk in the fridge, not the pantry, right? So you want to have the right investment for the right account. And then it goes down to, okay, like what are we actually investing in? Are we doing, I generally do more broad-based ETFs for clients instead of trying to pick individual stocks and bonds because I found there's actually very little value for that. So for me, it's really about figuring the top down. What are the goals of the account first? What are we doing with it? What's the time frame? And then kind of picking the allocation based on that.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, how do you help? I mean, because to have money to invest, people need to save. They need to have systems in place to help, make sure they're saving. What type of systems do you develop to help your clients save more money?
Sure. So a lot of it goes back to, once again, what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve and account for? And I do what's called reverse budgeting. And my buddy way back when talked to me about this. So shout out to Dimitri here. He told me this bank account system that you set up. And the goal is basically one account, one purpose. So what's the account used for? Because most people typically, paycheck comes in, you save, you spend your money, and then if you've got any money left over, typically they sweep into a bank account. That's generally what happens. Sometimes there's money in there, sometimes there's not. But what I do is, okay, first thing is the emergency fund filled up. Okay, let's fund that and let's have automatic savings. And a lot of people do it through direct deposit. So you have money going directly to these accounts. So everything's basically automated. So you have money filling up the investment account or the emergency fund first. Then you can have it go to what I call wealth coordination account or investment account. And then, if there's other goals along the way, like you want to buy for the house, we have money directed into that account. So we just kind of have, let's say we have $200 going to the wealth coordination account, $300 a month going into the house fund, and then we've got another $200 a month going into the vacation fund, for example. So we just kind of feed these different accounts specifically based on their goal, and then we automate it. So every month, either money's coming from their bank account via ACH, or it's literally direct deposit where boom, 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 you got 4 or 5 deposits going in different accounts. This way it happens automatically. And then what I found, a lot of clients have told me that it reduces a lot of stress, because I don't know if you've ever felt guilty about spending money.
Yep.
Yeah, well, most people do, because they know, oh, I shouldn't be spending this because I don't know if I'm ready for retirement yet, or am I, not on track for this. So when you have all your priorities scheduled away and squared away, knowing, okay, what we're doing now is keeping us on track for everything, you're free to spend the rest. So it has a lot more guilt-free spending involved with that system.
Well, one of the things too that I think earlier in my life, I taught children, and hand a kid a $5 bill. It's gonna be gone in a couple minutes. It's like hand them 50, and you're in an arcade. That $15 is gonna be gone. And one of the things that's nice about the automating is that you don't just sit there and go, ooh. You have that in front of you. It's like suddenly it's all, and that's one of the things I love about automating, is that it just takes away some of the temptation to do stupid things.
And a lot of times I do it so psychologically I'm putting it in an account that takes some getting to, right? Because a lot of people would put it to their bank account or savings account, right? And you can go instantly basically between your checking and savings. So I always make sure it's an account that you have to at least go there. It takes typically at least a day to get back. So it's a real decision you have to make. Like, do I really need this money for this thing I'm buying on Amazon? If that's the case, then yes. But like, if having that extra level of barrier, I found helps as well.
I like that, because it's that barrier. What was it? They said you give yourself 48 hours for anything that you want to buy. And if you still really feel like after 48 hours it's essential, then you can start looking at it. Don't buy it yet. I try for myself, I try to think about purchases for about a week, and it still doesn't stop me from making bad decisions sometimes, but it helps. And that makes, I haven't heard about that, creating these additional barriers, but it makes sense, just because people are people, and it's like the shiny thing. Ooh.
Yeah. Right. Oh, I saw this on Instagram. I'm gonna buy it. So that's
right. And it's getting more so. It's getting more so.
Well, the ads are getting much better, and they're really hyper targeted to us now. So it's a little bit tougher. And how many Amazon Prime days do we have now a year? Like 5 or 6. So it's it seems like we have a new one every other month.
Right. And they know they know how to get. But again, the nice thing is, then one of the things I like that you said is that you have money for this account, so that there is less guilt too. If you have set that aside, and that is, set aside for the things that you need, then there is less guilt, because all right, I've already done this. I've already put this money here, so we're good, and I've got enough to get this thing that I want / need. So I love that.
Yeah, I think it just because I think a lot of times it's really restrictive when you say, look, you have to budget this, and you have to save this, and you have to do this. We just naturally, as people, will kind of reject a lot of that stuff. It's
right.
Like if you went on a diet and said, hey, look, you can never have a donut ever again. You're like, I kind of want a donut now.
Right.
So, yeah. So it's like, hey, let's just make sure we have our meals planned for the week, and here's your cheat meal, and here's when you can have your donut. Great. Now I can do both. So it doesn't have to be so restrictive. And I find people rail from budgeting because, like, oh, that means I can't do something, or, Derek's going to get mad at me if I spend this money. It's like, that's not the case. Hey, you told me these were priorities of you. If they were priorities, this is what we need to do to get there. And if we get there, we'll be fine. Spend the rest. It'll be great.
How do you keep people on track when they start slipping? Because it happens at times. I love my wife. She has been on some wonderful diets in the past that she tried to get me to support her on. I was never successful at bringing her back to the fold. She hated me when she told me to do it, but then when I did it, I was nearly murdered. Yeah. How do you help keep people? Because it's this is the donut thing. You tell someone you can't eat a donut, and they're just like, I want that donut. How do you keep people on track?
Well, one of the parts of my process, we look at core values for clients. So we always want to have this kind of like overarching, this is why we're doing this. And I try and remind them of that. I think it's our check-in calls, it's our review meetings, just to say, hey, look, this is where you are. But one of the benefits of things being automated is it's harder for people to go off the rails, because they have to like call their HR department, change the direct deposit, or, ask me for the money because it's got that little wall because I've got their investment account, and they have to email me to say, hey, look, I need $10,000. Not that they have to tell me exactly what it's for. I don't care. But just a lot of that stuff just builds some extra layers of kind of guardrails against what they're doing. So I think between the check-ins and setting up the automation, it's typically pretty easy for a client to stay on track. But like I said, the core thing is always going to be what's the real value, and I could always tie it back to, hey, you told me saving for your kids' college was the most important thing because you didn't get your college saved, so we need to do that, and now you're not saving for college. What's going on? What's changed? And they're like, well, nothing. Okay, well, let's get back on track.
Yeah, I love that. And again, it's like, this is the thing that I wish more people would think about, because if you are wanting to get in shape, it's very easy to understand why you need a personal trainer, why you need someone who can give you a meal plan, because it's very much like, it's faster results for one. For most people, you go work out for 4 to 6 months and you look different, you feel different. But for financial planning, it takes time. There is this longer game per se, and I think that sometimes it's hard for people to remember the long game, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we occasionally look back, because I think people always don't understand, hey, I've come this far. And I think that's where looking back, I had a call with a review meeting with a client recently, and we talked about, hey, remember when you guys were making this and you were saving me $100 a week or a month, and that was all you could save, but we're still doing it, and now you guys have this much money, but now you could save more because we did X, Y, and Z, and they got promotions along the way, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of crazy how far we've come. So I think, giving yourself some grace and looking back and thinking, I've actually done the work and it's made a difference. But I mean, to your point, it's hard to see results immediately with finances, but over time you could really typically build up a good amount of value in kind of a relatively short amount of time even.
So that plays into my next question. It's like people have two mindsets, like some people are like, I'm going to focus out there, and some people are like, I want to focus here. How do you help people plan for both, finding joy in the present and handling things in the present, but also looking out towards retirement, looking out toward that time down the road that people talk about, but no one ever thinks they're going to get to? It's like, it's so far out there. And then I was reading something like, I'm the tail end of Gen X, and like they're like, and there was this news article like, it was like Gen X now finding themselves not prepared for retirement. I was like, hang on, what? What? Come on, man. I thought I was just like, I'm just getting in my stride, but like that's, you just feel like you're getting in your stride, and then, hey, it's retirement starts sneaking up on you. How do you balance the present and the future?
It's a great question. It's a challenge. And it's actually a challenge on both ends, because I have some clients that just save too much money. Like, hey guys, we can pull this back. It's okay. You don't have to save this much. You're on track. So I think a lot of it is really defining the priorities and really figuring out, okay, what are the things that really are going to add, value to your life, or what are the things that you really enjoy doing that we need to focus on doing today? For some folks that's vacations, and some folks that's buying a car. So it's really just kind of balancing out that. And with our financial planning software that we use, we can easily show them the impacts of decisions. And I do things live. Like a lot of financial advisors will shove this 70-page plan in front of a client with all these charts and graphs that look really cool and important. But I'll say, okay, well, all right, let's say we save this. Okay, what does that impact have on now versus your retirement? And we can kind of in real time decide together what's the right thing to do. And I think that collaborative approach really helps, because now people have agency because they've helped make the decision. It's not me just telling them, save this in here, save this in this bucket, and save that in that bucket, and then you'll be fine. Go do it. It's, they're coming to the conclusion with me saying, okay, this is what happens, and this is the impact of us, doing the fun stuff now versus waiting later. Is that okay with you? Does that mean that trade-offs can be down the line, but we're going to have to face that? So that's a lot of the conversations I have with clients. We do it real time.
That's awesome. Well, it's awesome that it's happening real time, because I'm such a visual learner. And one of the things, I loved playing video games when I was younger. And like World of Warcraft, and you can see the jewels being mined, and like there's this visual representation of things. And I not throwing any banks under the bus, but like I have to say that like the software, the UX, the user interface for some of the bank's websites for a long time wasn't very fun. It's just like, there's your numbers, and like I'm one that I wish more of this could be gamified. More of this could be, like you give people positive feedback as they go. I've been looking up different budget tracking apps, and I was looking at all of these different ones. And one of the things that I noticed was, and this sounds weird, they weren't necessarily fun. They're just bare bones, and you put it in, and I was just like, man, I want one that gives me rewards. I want little dinging things when I do something right, and I don't know.
High score, yeah.
Right? I score, boom, boom, like, I loved, what was that movie? What was that movie? Scott Pilgrim or something like
Versus the World, yeah.
Versus the World, and they had all of those little effects everywhere. Man, I wish my life had more of those,
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, Robinhood has been really good with that because they give you, like, the screen lights up, you get things when you make a trade, which in my opinion, can be a little drastic because that goes right into, to me, it's like phase 3 or 4 is, that's not the first thing you should be doing. But unfortunately, a lot of folks, especially the younger generations, are doing Robinhood now because it is so easy and it's gamified because you buy a stock, you get a reward. It's like, is that the best stock for you to buy? All that stuff. So we got to be careful of that. But I think to your point, when it comes to, hey, savings and doing all that stuff, right, we should look at it and say, hey, look, you're on track. That's awesome. Or like you're 90% of your goal, like almost there. Like kind of when you get that notification on your watch, it says, hey, you're almost at your steps, like 5 more minutes, right, and then you'll get there. Right. Yeah. It'd be nice if we had a little bit more of that in the finance world with especially the good stuff about, staying on track for your goals and things like that.
Right. But, one of the things, too, did you ever see, I have a podcast coming up, and I was chatting with the guest, and we were talking, and she came up with a list of questions, and she's like, I like this, but she's like, I feel so, is there anything else you can do? And I was like, hey, you want to talk about movies? And she's like, what? And I was like, well, let's talk about movies with financial concepts. And one of the things that we were tossing around movies, and we were talking about a couple fun ones, but like Jerry Maguire. And do you ever see the Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith?
Yeah.
And that movie popped up, and there was something because it plays into the next question. Like that guy, Chris Gardner, loved his kid, loved his family, but his finances were a mess, and everything was kind of messed up, and you could see there was one scene where he's crying, holding his son, crying in the bathroom, right? And it was like when his life changed from this to this, when he got his things in order, his outlook on life changed. When he fixed his finances and he got confident with, you could see the whole movie is about building his confidence. He just is, it's just climbing the whole movie. And at the end of the movie, he's almost like this different person. So my question for you is like how does building financial confidence change your client's outlook on life and the way they approach the world?
Well, when you have financial stress, that's really all you think about. Because I remember when I first started, I made no money, and I was always thinking about, okay, if I get this, I can put this amount of money in my gas tank right now. I could put just $20 and that'll get me through next Thursday, right? And then, okay, you're playing all this mental game. I can pay this much for groceries and all that. Not all my clients are really typically in that position, but I'm sure a lot of your listeners are probably nodding their head like, yeah, I feel stressed. So when it's something you're always thinking about, it's always going to hold you back because you're spending a lot of mental energy thinking about all these little things about like, when's my next step? When's this dollar coming in? And when you get organized and you get in a path and you feel like you're achieving your goals and you feel like you have money to spend on top of that, you just feel much more relaxed and much more free. And now you focus on not just the basics, but the good stuff in life and growth and all that stuff. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy, right? You've got to get those basic needs done. And when people are always thinking about, oh my God, I'm guilty about spending this, or I'm doing this and I shouldn't be, or and it's a lot of it is the unknown, and most people just don't take the time to think about, okay, where am I now? Where am I going? And am I on the right path? And if you're not doing that, you're gonna have a lot of unknowns still, and that's what breeds a lot of stress, I found, especially financially.
And one of the things too is like maybe people have a great income and they've got everything what they think set, but like it's the same thing that I was talking about earlier with like health patients. I've seen people and I'm doing great, and really the guy was about ready to need a like full-blown triple bypass or something, because sometimes things might seem okay, but under the surface things are not going the way they should, which is again coming to someone who can really look at things and go, let's give you a good workup financially.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like talking to movies like Uncut Gems, where he's like always trying to move money around and do that thing, right? He's just constantly stressed and thinking about the next deal, the next move.
Right.
He's got to move this jewelry, right? All that stuff. So people are in that situation where like, okay, I've got this money, I've got this big mortgage, I got this expensive car, or I send my kid to private school. I've got all these obligations, and now I'm just constantly thinking about all these obligations. I mean, honestly,
Yes.
one of the worst pieces of advice I was ever given was when my first or second year into this business. Someone said, you should buy the expensive car, you should get this because it's going to push you to make more money. And to me, that just was so backwards. I couldn't believe a financial advisor told me this. And, it was totally the wrong advice, in my opinion, because if you have to have that financial stress to motivate you, you're probably in the wrong job.
Right.
But there are a lot of people that think along those lines where I've got to keep going because I got to, I'm in sales and I've got to get the next quota and, but I've got this really expensive car, right? But I've got this really expensive house and this country club lifestyle, right? So it's those things that we think we have to kind of keep, and you're just constantly running on this treadmill. That's a challenge I see pretty frequently too.
That makes a lot of sense because, it's that whole, what was that the term back in the day, keeping up with the Joneses. You've got this thing that you're trying to do to keep up with everyone and expectations, and your expectations for yourself. So how many people feel like, well, I should be here in life, and so rarely are we there. Because it's this absolute. That's never really how life goes. Success is more this squiggly line than this straight line.
Yeah, it's never linear. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the challenge, especially now with social media everywhere. It's so much easier to compare yourself to others, but all you're seeing is someone's highlights.
100%. I remember ages ago, my friend was a DJ in a nightclub, and there was this one couple that every night came in and spent all this money. They were living at large, and then one day we went to this cafe across town. And I saw this couple rolling up to this tiny little apartment. It was the smallest place I've ever seen. And it was like this one-room place, and they packed all their stuff in. And no judgment on the small place. That was their choice. But it was all of the money they were throwing around was an illusion. They were barely getting by. And, and it was interesting because so much importance was placed by them on looking big and seeming like they were bigger than they were. But the reality is their financial situation looked like it was sure pretty unhealthy, and success looks different for everyone. And maybe they were prioritizing something different. So again, I don't want to get into judgment, but it was just the illusion was an illusion.
Right. I mean, you saw them at the club, you would think differently than if you saw them at their house.
Right, exactly. Now, can you help me share a success story where taking action made a big difference in someone's financial journey?
Yeah, I think one of the things I would say is I started with this couple, a lot of times I get them when their kids just graduate college because that's the first time in 20 plus years where they could actually think about themselves for a little bit. And one of their goals they said to me was, hey, look, we want to have this house, a second home to move down to when we retire down in Florida. I said, that's great. So we kind of put them on a path to do that. Their plan was to do it in the mid-60s. But lo and behold, this year, actually, their best friends also have a house down in Florida. The house across the street opened up for sale.
Nice.
Because we've been prepping for this moment, even a couple of years earlier, they were able to close on that house this year.
That's awesome.
So their dream happened. Not only that, they happened with their best friends across the street. So because we kind of did all of those things leading up to this date, it wasn't hey, we did this next year. This was a multi-year thing we were looking at, but we always had this on the back burner as something that we needed to be ready for in case it did happen. And, lo and behold, they were able to get the house that they wanted to in the exact location they wanted to get it. And it was even a couple of years earlier than they thought they would. So I think that's a pretty big win that we were able to do for the client.
That's huge. And it's because you're planning ahead. You have a game plan. I loved that with the football reference earlier with Bill Belichick. It's like do your job, but also you have to have a plan. When you go into a game, like you've researched your opponent, you've watched your film, what you're going to play, and you have a plan for that game. And whether we realize it or not, we're playing this giant Monopoly game of life. And if you are, kicking and screaming about not wanting to be in this game, it doesn't matter. You're already in it,
You're in it, yeah.
You're in it. So you might as well have a plan to kind of get to where you want to be going. And I think most everyone wants to be, feeling a sense of peace and safety, and that, things are heading in the right direction.
Well, I mean, their big question was like, can we do this? Right. And so that's what most people think, like, okay, and maybe if they didn't have a plan, I mean, I don't know, because it's hard to say what the opposite would have been, but maybe they wouldn't have done it if they didn't have everything organized. And okay, now we built in the plan, like, okay, we moved it up a couple years early. Are we still okay? Yep, we confirmed the numbers that we're still okay. And that gave them the confidence to go do it and not worry about it. Because maybe in another scenario, you're still buying a house, but maybe you're like, I don't know if we could do this or not, or maybe we need to cut back here or there. And that wasn't the case. So it really gives the value of, okay, actually looking at your numbers and saying, okay, this is the plan. We can afford it. Great. Let's do it.
Yeah, 100%. Now, what do you think is the most common misconception about financial planning that leads people to stress? And how do you help your clients feel safer?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest misconception is what we do. I think the industry has really moved a long way over the last 10 to 15 years. It used to be just, going back to Pursuit of Happiness, original financial advisors were just brokers. They would just sell you stocks.
Right.
That's all they would do, right? And then we kind of moved into investment planning. So I think a majority of people still think that's really what we do. Oh, I don't have enough money to talk to you. Well, now, we charge planning fees, so a client doesn't need to have $2 million to talk to me. They want to play the planning fee, then they could do it. So I think the big misconception is we don't just focus on finances. We look at all other pictures of a person's financial world. So going through debt and insurance and cash flow and, estate planning, retirement planning, tax planning, like all those things are included with a financial advisor. And if they're not, you should probably be looking for a different one. But that's probably the biggest misconception I see in the industry is we're still heavily focused on investment planning. And in terms of just making clients feel lighter, I think it's really just kind of running the numbers and going through them. I think a lot of it is education. I really focus heavily on getting them to understand why we're doing something. Because if they're ever asked at a cocktail party, hey, why did you guys do XYZ thing? And they want to be able to say, okay, we did it because boom, boom, boom. And they go, oh, okay. It's not just me telling people, it's them kind of coming along with me.
I love that, because I love that too. It really is about getting them to come with you. It's about getting them to understand the why, because everyone can. It's easy to, what was that? Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a day, or hey, no, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a long time. If you just show people, we're going to do this, but like, it's great to have the why figured out, the understanding of there's a reason for this, and it's this.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's so important because you may be fighting it, and I always say, look, you guys are as clients, you're totally free to disagree with me. Let's run through the numbers. Let's look at it. Let's have a discussion about it. Let's find a fit that's going to be something for you. So I think that's really important because they're taking agency in the process, and it's not me telling what to do. It's us deciding what to do together in a way that makes sense for them. So that to me is the ultimate piece of planning. It's not my plan, it's their plan.
Right. Which feeds into the next thing that I want to ask you, because again, at the end of the day, what you're telling me is that you're helping people financially plan, but there also is this part of you that's an educator. Like you are having to increase financial knowledge to get people to understand why they need to do that. It's not just do this, but here's the reason you do it. Now, how do you change your approach or tailor your approach to increase financial knowledge for different clients?
I think it really becomes on trying to get to know them and how they learn. And I always typically ask them, like, what's the best way, like, what's the way you best take in information? Are you a visual person? Do you need me to draw something out? Do we need to do something together? Do you just want to see a ton of spreadsheets? Because I could do that for you. So it depends on where clients are. So I think you want to first meet them where they are. But I'm also constantly providing additional information. So if we have a meeting, I have a YouTube page where I tend to draw things out on a whiteboard a lot in meetings. So I have a lot of things that I typically topics we discuss that I have videos on that after a meeting, I'll also send them the video of it. So to kind of reinforce, hey, we talked about like the bank account system, it's on there. So I'll say, this is what we're doing for savings and here you go. So I kind of reinforce what we talk about, because people inevitably will forget stuff after a meeting. I mean, we go, over a lot of stuff typically, and it's hard to remember everything. I don't know any meeting that anyone's ever been to where they said, I remember 100% what you said. So I think, following up with the notes, following up with video. I do a lot of asynchronous planning with clients too, where I'll go through the concepts on the software, record myself going through them with them, and then sending it to them. So they can see not just me writing a 20-page email of why we're doing something. So a lot of that is kind of meeting the clients where they are and providing the information to them the way they best receive it.
That makes a lot of sense, because no two people are the same. And so it must be that no two approaches are the same. But yet also, because you have all these different resources. Oh, you're a visual learner? Let's go check out this YouTube. If you are an auditory learner, well, check out this. There's different options for different people. Now, as people start getting financially organized, how can that free up time in their day-to-day life? How can getting all of their ducks in a row make their life more simple and flow better?
Well, I think one silly thing is how many websites do you typically log in to check your finances? 7, 8 now?
Right.
Between all your bank accounts, your 401ks, your investment accounts. So I think one thing is we can tie everything into one account, and they can update the balances and the holdings every day.
That's awesome.
So they just have one sign-on where they could look at how everything's doing. So I think that's one little way where we can save some time for clients. But I think just knowing that things are automated. So if you don't have to go in there every month and pay a bill, like physically go on, sign on, send a bill or write a check. As much as we can automate, you're not like physically going on to a bank account and sending money from here, this account to this account. So in between automating it and getting everything organized, we're typically able to save probably, 3 to 5 hours a month, I'd say, of time for people, instead of just kind of willy-nilly kind of looking at things ad hoc.
I love that. I love that because, again, time is a valuable resource, and it's something that it's hard to get back. If you are wasting it, it's gone.
I mean, I'm sure that's time that you'd rather spend with your kids or your friends or whatever,
100%.
instead of just saying, hold on, I got to send this bill today because I haven't automated this yet. So it's a really, we have so many tools now available that it's kind of silly not to be doing this stuff.
If you could go back in time to and meet a younger version of yourself, what financial advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, I had a friend ask me this a while back, so I already have an answer for you. But one thing I wish I can go back in time is to go to 16-year-old Derek and say, okay, you've got your first job. You're going to open up this thing called a Roth IRA.
Right.
It's going to grow tax-free. It's going to grow, based on the investments that are in there. But by the time you are 65, you're going to have a huge chunk of money just because you're putting even a little bit in now is going to make such a difference, because it's going to double every 10 years essentially. So that's 50 years almost of doubling. So it's 5 doubles you're going to have. That's probably one thing I would definitely tell my younger self.